Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Exploring Creative Minds podcast. I'm your host, Judah Hooper. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Adriano Aponte. He is a film composer and musician, and I'm really excited to have him today. So, thank you for doing this, Adriano.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for that. It's my pleasure.
So, I see you have some posters in your background. Is this like your studio
Yeah,
where you
yeah, that's my
record?
studio. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, I do have a few posters I collected during the years. I guess they are among my favorite film, probably.
Mm.
You might see Jurassic Park, then there is
Yes.
Amadeus, and there are a couple of Back to the Futures one.
Mm.
So
So
that's
my those are good movies.
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah. I mean, probably I just purchased them when I was probably a teenager, so I just kept them really.
mm. Yeah, no, same. I have posters in the back of
Yeah,
my
I see.
room too. um, yeah, I love posters. Um, um, so how did you get started to where you are today? What got you interested in film composing? Was that the thing? Did you do it since you were a child? Like, what's your story?
I guess I got into the film scoring craft when I was around 23, probably, or something like that. And I mean, I started as a classical pianist, so was originally like a yeah piano player, and then eventually I got into composition. And it was straight away that I then started to get interested in film scoring as a craft. So one thing's led to another. I actually started with theater, and so I would compose for plays in theater and little short movie, and so one thing led to another, and I kind of became like obsessed with with the craft, and so I started my journey.
Mm.
So that brought me to study specifically composition for screen. Um, but I started as a musician, so to speak.
You started as a musician. Okay, so what was the first instrument you learned how to play?
It was guitar when I was around six, probably.
Whoa,
I did
same.
that at school. They offered like a program, where you could eventually learn one instrument. So I picked the guitar, but I probably dropped that after a couple of years or so, and then I started piano because my older brother was already studying piano. So I would
Uh,
I would just uh, play with him, or sort of mocking him while he was playing. So then I
mm.
started to take some lessons, and I think I never stopped, since then. But yeah, one thing's led to another, and then eventually got interested in composition. As I said, I
Right.
started also to play in some bands, some music band with
Sure.
so I
Mm.
was the keyboard player, as
Yeah.
many of the pianists probably do when you are an early, as a teenager. So I started to get involved in some cover bands first, and then eventually we got some original tracks composed by ourselves, and I was one, of the main composer among, the group. But then
Wow.
eventually just split. We split, and I used to have a few bands actually, but just a couple of them we would, compose original tracks. But yeah, then I split, and I took the sort of a solo
Mm.
journey. Yeah.
Right. That's awesome. What kind of music did your band play? And was that in like
Um,
high school or?
yeah,
Yeah.
it was in high school, and we
Mm.
mainly played rock and then progressive rock. So
Mm.
we went from, I don't know, Pink Floyd to Dream Theater, and and these
Whoa.
sort of things. Yeah, I guess it was at that time it was also fun because especially Dream Theater and all that were a little bit more challenging and technical wise. So
Yeah.
It was fun, and I was also into the rock and in Pink Floyd especially,
Yeah. Same.
and I used to have a couple of vintage organs. One was a Super Continental or something. The other one was a Farfisa, because they were the kind of organ that you would hear, in the old records. So I got obsessed with that, and so along with the keyboard, I have, and that's probably where I started to also, enjoying to have like more instruments than than the main one, than the main keyboard or the piano, right, or the acoustic piano. I started to enjoy having multiple instruments under my fingers and try to experiment and also synthesize and stuff like that. So yeah, so I played basically in bands during and through my high school, all the high school. Then
Mm.
when I got into the college, and eventually, I just didn't probably have so much time to dedicate to that. So I
Right.
dropped.
When you're, it's cool because like when you're in a band, I feel like you learn how the dynamics work of every instrument, even if you don't know how to play it. I think that's the cool thing about being in a band is like, because you have to break it down and rehearse together. It's like
Yeah.
I'm sure that helped you for film composing because you get an idea of like how everything flows together. You know.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, playing in a group and playing with the other, it's a very very strong learning experience where you are aware of the people that are playing with you. You are aware of the other sounds, and you're aware of the roles that everybody has. So it's really important to respect the other musicians and
Mm,
respect
yes.
the space within the band. And so, because when you play, as a solo player, as a solo performer, let's say if you're a classical pianist and you play your piece, in the end it's just you, and you practice alone and you perform alone. Whereas when you are in a band or in an orchestra, you learn how to you learn how the little pieces of the puzzle of the music and the music piece. So you get a sense of what the other people are doing, and also I think you get a better sense of, in terms of composition wise, how the track is made, and all the parts. And so it was very useful, and he helped me. And I remember when I then enrolled to Berklee College of Music in Boston, where
Mm.
you you would you would do also some mandatory classes in ensemble. They call it like ensemble. So, and I would play different genre, and it was very interesting because it went from pop to rock to jazz and all this kind of genre. And I was already a little bit used to to play in a band, so that was useful for the class. And then of course you 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 break down that, and you learn so much from that classes as well. So I guess it's all part of yeah, the journey as a musician and eventually composer.
Right. Where do you start when you make any song, I guess? Is it something like, is it a melody that comes to you sort of thing, or is it how do you start when you get hired for a job?
Okay, well, that's a very tough question to answer, because
Yes.
there is no, there's. I think it really depends on the project. I mean, if I'm working on a movie, or the approach is probably a little bit different than from an advertising, or so to speak. Composition wise, it really depends on the subject of the movie, probably. And yeah, as sometimes I start with writing the melody, or yeah, the melody, and like humming a melody. I'm one of the kind of the guy that you can find walking the streets, holding a phone and humming something, and be very embarrassed about that, and people are looking at you like, what does he, what's he
What is he
doing?
doing?
Maybe it's on WhatsApp or something. But
Yeah.
so yeah, or sometimes I just think about the harmony that can fit, the mood, and can fit uh, the soul of the project. So there is really no solely way to do that, and so it really depends.
Right.
Sometimes I get inspired by an instrument that I start playing, and so in the end, is the project is gonna speak to me and probably suggest me something, about the approach that I'm gonna have while working
Right.
on that, if it makes sense.
Yeah. No, it does make sense. So it's like it's dependent on like the story and the
Yeah,
intention behind it, and that's what
exactly.
inspires you.
Yeah.
So do you just show like different pieces and ideas to the director, like, or like how does that work? After you come up with the melody you like.
Again, it really depends on where do we start. So if I
Mm.
start from the script and there is no footage yet, I usually write a sort of uh, long form piece that can I don't know, be a 6 minutes piece or 8 minutes, or it really depends. And
Mm.
so I try to incorporate all the kind of emotions that I would like to convey with the music. So and I can say, okay, look, I took this particular scene from the script, and that scene and this other scene, and I make a very long piece where you can transition from one scene to another, from one feeling to another.
Mm.
So this really helps, because even if I don't have the footage, I get usually very much inspired by the script, and
Mm.
I can also maybe overwrite some stuff. I can
Mm.
maybe write too much, but then
Right.
it's always better to it's always easier, let's say, to probably shrink your music a little bit, shrink down, and then eventually you can expand it. But so that's how usually it works. Or if I
Mm.
do have a rough cut, so let's say the director comes to me and he says, "This is the rough cut." I eventually got the script as well, but I can work already on some footage. Then I'll probably take the most difficult scene, or the scene where probably all the core of the music is expressed in that scene, and I
Mm.
work on that. And then again, it's like a little puzzle for me, because if I do have the big idea, like the big picture music
Sure.
wise, and it's like my whole puzzle here, then I can take some bits and bobs here and there, and
Mm.
then go backwards, for example, or use some of the material that I already have composed for the scene, the big scene.
Mm.
So yeah, if it's for example in advertising, it is usually I got like a brief, or some instruction on what they're looking for, and then I work on the rough cut, because usually it's a rough cut, or and I in that case I really work straight directly to picture, because you
Mm.
want to be as specific as you want, and there is a less space to let's say go on the edges, or what you want to do.
Right.
You kind of need to get straight to the point, most likely also because the time stretch is quite different. So again, it depends also, as I said, on what stage we are at and they are at.
Mm.
If they call you even before shooting, and then you got some
Yeah.
more time to experiment, and maybe to show different ideas. Whereas if they are in a little bit more of a rush, and they need something yesterday, if you know what I mean,
Yeah.
then you might work more quickly and getting more to the point. I know it sounds a little bit cynic sometimes, but
No.
um, but time is the essence, as they say. So
Yeah. Yeah. You're always limited by time with with any creative thing.
yeah,
Um, and yeah, I know there are some film composers that I've worked with that they only like they're they're more interested in they want to see like the finished product basically. before they come up with anything. Um,
Mm.
but yeah, there are some composers that are like that. I've enjoyed working more with the people that like are kind of what you're saying. They come up with ideas based off of the story and the screenplay, and then it might not all be there or whatever, but like the idea is there, and so
Yeah.
you're on the same page. But
Yeah, exactly.
you know,
And there's
I think
also
that's better.
more space for making I don't want to say mistakes, but to to because in the end it's the directors or the producers who have a vision. It's not. I mean, you're kind of sometimes you're kind of a filter, like you're the music filter of their vision. So the job is to to speak like musically, but it's there. They are talking. So in a
Mm.
way, if you know what I mean. So I do like, of course, working on picture because you have so much materials and so much. It gives you
Right.
so much. So you might get inspired. You might get you might think differently than just reading the script and just working on the
Right.
script.
Of course.
Uh, but it's actually very it's actually very and I really enjoy to work on the script first because sometimes somehow I feel more a little bit more free to experiment and to take different you know routes and see what works, what doesn't.
Mm. How do you feel about temp music in like
Oh.
the rough cuts? Do you like them or do you not? Yeah.
Uh, well, I think I have mixed feelings about that. I mean,
Yeah.
I do understand temp music might be useful to probably to the editor or also to the director where they can get an idea. The thing is that someone can get very attached to that. And so if you do show other solutions or other, music voices, they might, you know, uh, get too much attached
Mm.
to the temp track. So
Right.
they might not see, your point of view. So I guess our job is also to respect what they want, as I said, like their vision, but also uh, to try to show them that there are, maybe some different, if there are, some different approaches or some different kind of results that you can achieve with music, maybe different from the temp track. And in the end, I guess we need to, as a composers and as musicians, we need to uh, be faithful to the music and to our voice. So
Mm.
I guess the temp track might be useful to get some sort of direction. But if we are, as a musician, we also are capable of understand, maybe what they what is that they like about the temp track, might be just some instruments, might be just some harmony, maybe just some twist or some crescendo in that. You know what I mean? So,
Mm.
because if you're dealing with people who are rightfully not dealing with music every day, they have a different perception of the music itself. So, it's our
Right.
job also to interpret what they are looking. If they choose a specific temp track for that. So it doesn't necessarily mean that we need to do a sound alike, which I'm strongly against
Yeah.
most of the cases.
Yeah, and I see exactly what you mean by that. Like the idea of them getting too attached to the temp track, so then you make something and they're like, "Oh, it doesn't sound exactly like that," you know. Yeah, that is the danger with using temp music. Um, is like you said,
Yeah.
you get a little too attached to it, or I think the benefit of temp music is like if you're working with a story that an original story that people aren't as familiar with, it gets everyone in post on the same page of what like the uh, the timing and the tone of that
Yeah.
scene is. At least that's the way that I use it for temp music.
Yeah.
Is like I only use it for that kind of thing. Like, okay, this is like this is a montage of this character doing something, so it needs to have this tone,
Yeah, definitely.
and that sort of thing. But the composer, they can make something completely different. It doesn't have to just be a copy of what this is, but
Yeah, no,
this
of
is the
course.
tone, this is the rhythm, this
Yeah,
is the feel, you
no,
know.
absolutely. I guess another risk is also a technical one, meaning that if the temp track is, for example, a 90-piece orchestra, it would be a little bit trickier to get a demo maybe who sounds exactly like that, if you know what I mean. I mean,
Yeah,
um,
right.
so that's also part of our job to be a good mock-up artist, um, which is actually very fun. Uh, but yeah, sometimes if you have a very well produced and live recorded tune as a temp track, it might be a little bit more, let's say, not only trickier, but it might be a little bit more time consuming to get a similar result, to convince that, to have sort of the same sound, you know, quality wise, if it makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does make sense. Yeah, yeah. So what was the hardest job you've had so far? If you could answer that question, and why was it hard?
Well, it depends on on what kind of what point of view, and what capacity. Sometimes it's hard where you ask something and you know mm, maybe you realize that you need more time, in order to achieve something, and that might be hard because the deadline can be very tight, for example. So that happened probably like that. I would have, you know, I wish to have more time, so to speak. Not only for the technical point of view, but for the creative point of view. From the creative point of view, because um, as much as this is a job, it's still uh, I mean, your emotions are very, you get involved emotionally. You know what I mean? So sometimes you might need a little more time to express that emotion in music. So sometimes you say, oh, maybe feel like a week more or something. I could have done better. I guess that's the key. When I think of hard, something, a job that might be hard to do, it's also because there is maybe a time restraint, or so. Yeah, uh,
No, that
probably,
makes sense.
probably
Time
that's
strain.
that's yeah. Um, yeah. Other than that, it's all very very much fun to do. So even if it's hard, it's good.
Right. You like the challenge of it.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely, yes.
so what's the shortest amount of time you had to compose something? Like, you know.
Um, well, I guess the shortest time I deal with is where I have to compose for an advertising. It is
Mm.
usually, maybe they call you on Tuesday or Wednesday, and they want something ready for Friday. So maybe a couple of days.
Ooh.
Yeah. The
Uh,
thing
that's
the
fine.
thing is, yeah, the shortest is probably been a couple of days. Sometimes it's even, do you have anything that can already fit the brief and can send me by tonight or something? So maybe you have, like a few hours just to tweak things around of some already existing tracks of yours that you can adapt maybe to the brief or something.
Mm.
The challenge here is that they want something that is ready. They don't want, well, when they say they want a demo, it means it needs to be ready to go anyway. That if you put
Right.
like on TV, it's good to go. So that's probably again a little bit of a technical challenge. Of course, when you deal with this kind of project, maybe you already have some sort of templates to you can use and work with. because I mean, starting from scratch all the times would be too much time consuming, and so you need to probably get more time for your creativity, and so have maybe it was always good to have some templates ready. I mean, but that's for all composers. Everybody does that. We
Right.
do work with templates and all. So, but yeah, I guess the thing is that in that very short time, you need to come up with an idea which is good enough, and again, it's strict to the point. Straight to the point. You cannot really playing around with that. You don't have a lot of time to experiment, so you need
Right.
to have a good idea that works and works right away, and you need to compose that, mix that, do a little bit of mastering and all. I mean, you need to deliver a final sort of speak, product.
Right.
So yeah. So I would say, yeah, again, this shortest time probably a couple of days or so.
Yeah, that sounds like a challenge. I mean, I guess like you have like with whatever advertising company is, you have an idea of they give you an idea of like what they're looking for based off
Yep.
of what the product is and what the whatever what the commercial is or whatever they're you have like an idea of like what they want. So I could see how like you figure it out. But yeah, that's so interesting.
Yeah. The, the thing is that sometimes you do work with temp tracks for them.
Mm,
Most of them they do have temp tracks, but sometimes the temp tracks are so distant and different from each other that you don't, you have to figure out what they are looking for really. Again, they might like a rhythm or from a track and the melody of another track, which
mm.
is completely different even in general.
Right, right.
So that's a challenge there, to understand what they're looking for. And yeah, I guess also I forgot what I was saying. Yeah, the maybe you are working with the video, but maybe you're not, because some of them you just get the storyboard.
Mm,
And I also was saying, it is very short. Like 2 days is very, you got very little time, but
yeah.
it is usually between like 30 seconds to probably 2 minutes, 2 minutes and a half for music, which is not a lot anyway. So
Right.
if you think about that, yeah, you got very limited time, but it's also uh, not a long, track.
Right. Yeah, it's not hours and hours worth of
Mm.
music they're asking for.
Yeah,
Yeah, and like you said, you already have an idea of like what they want
yeah,
in the meeting,
definitely.
basically.
Yeah.
So, what do you call it? Is what's the hardest process technically? Because I mean, I'm assuming like the process is like you write, of course, you have an idea of what that's going to be, and then you have to mix that, and then you have to master it. So, what's the hardest part for you technically, in that sense?
Um, well, I guess there are again. It really depends on the piece of music I'm composing. So if it's an orchestral, of course I will probably dedicate more time to the on the mockup and to make it sound real. Uh, Whereas if it's pop music or any hybrid genre, I might spend a little bit more time on the uh, production, yeah, or post production of it.
Right.
So I mean, I guess they're also interchangeable. So um, yeah, I guess the technical part is to make sound an orchestra real and to make an hybrid sound, cutting edge and because the quality, I guess nowadays is very standard is very high. So if you're not used to do every day like I don't know, trap music or rap or hip hop, or if it's not your cup of tea, end up spending more time on the production side of that particular composition, right? So
Right.
again,
Where
it
do you?
depends.
Yeah, yeah. It depends. Yeah, no, that makes sense. Like, so for an orchestra, where where do you even start? I've always been curious with that. Like, how do you start when you're working with, like, at least 30 different types of instruments on something? Do you compose like something individually for each person, or like how does that work? You know.
Uh, yeah, I mean, usually it is like that. You write for each players. Again, it depends on the sort of level of details that you need.
Mm.
Um, so you might write, a melody, and then you might not need a lot of parts, doing some contrapoint, or and you might need only some sort of orchestration to that. So again, it really depends. Um, of course, the more complex situation is where you need to write for, yeah, like a big orchestra, and
Mm.
so if you want to get as much as detail, you need to write for, yeah, each play unique within each section for each player. So, but it's not always the case, to be honest. It really
Mm.
depends. But and of course, in this case, the more detailed you are, the harder it's going to be to get a good sounding mock-up. When I say good, I mean faithful to the real, uh, the real deal, to the real orchestra.
Right.
So if you work, for example, with patches, and maybe you don't need a very detailed orchestration, you know, then you might achieve a good, you know, sound all around. So it
Mm.
really depends.
Right. Makes sense. Yeah, that aspect is always really fascinating to me. The kind of how like each instrument is like playing a different thing, and then they all combine it together to make this collective sound. It's so cool. It's like the most purest form of music, if you think about it.
Yeah.
It's very cool. What do you look for in like a director when you're working with them on like a creative, like narrative project? Like, what are the things in a director that you look for? Um,
Do you,
yeah.
do you mean like would I ask to a director in order to get a sense of what he wants or she wants?
Yeah, it's or more I guess like what separates a bad one from a good one to you, and what are the things that you like about working with
Mm.
directors as opposed to like doing stuff yourself and that sort of thing.
I don't think there is such thing as bad directors in general. I mean, if
Mm.
uh, he or she is in the end a creative person, just as I am. So I would say I'm during the years I met a different level of directors, not necessarily on how good they are technically, or how good is the movie in the end. But they some of them might be more aware of the role of the music, and what do they want. I even work with some director who would play an instrument and would know music on a certain level. So of course, with, with that kind of person, it is a little bit easier to speak technically, and so there is a little bit more in-depth conversation about how the music should sound, and he or she can go very much in details. But that's might be also a tricky thing for me, because then he or she can say, oh, I don't like B minor, or I don't like the clarinet,
Mm.
use such and such, you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
the more in deep they can get, of course, the more they can have sort of control on what I do.
Mm.
So it is good on one side. It's always a pleasure to share some music information more technically with the director. Um, on the other hand, somehow, you work with someone who doesn't know rightfully the difference from a trumpet or a clarinet,
Mm-hmm.
which is absolutely fine. It's our job to make sure that he or she gets what she or he wants. So on and that of course it's a different level of working relationship, because there is a little bit more they are a little bit more, let's say, uh, they might say, the music is it's completely in your hand. Please do what you need to do you know to achieve a good result. So in that case, you might have more freedom, because they don't have necessary music knowledge. But at the same time, it might be sometimes a little bit more difficult to communicate, because they might
Mm.
say, "I don't like the flute or this sound," but maybe you actually didn't play any flute. There's no flute,
Right.
in the piece. So then there is a little bit of, more difficult in communicating to understand
Right.
what they mean by that.
Mm. Yeah. What
Um,
flute? You're like, huh?
yeah,
What?
exactly. That actually happened to me. They
Oh,
said,
well.
yeah, said I don't like the flute. I say, all right. I mean, I didn't say there is no flute. It probably meant a clarinet in this case.
Right.
So so that's that's something that can happen, and it's absolutely fine. It's part of the job. It's just
Right.
a matter of on what level you are communicating, and of course, the more they know about music, the better it is in a certain way. But uh, they can go deeper and have more control somehow, or want
Yeah.
to have more control somehow.
Right. Um, I feel like yeah, that's like it's an interesting process for sure. The sort of yeah, director and composer and sort of like you said, there's some directors like they know a lot about music.
Yeah.
Um, so they can tell you what they want easier. Where more people are like, okay, I want it to sound like this, and they send you Star Wars or something, and and that's it. And they'll tell you
Yeah.
whether or not they like it or not, you know, and that's it. So it's interesting how yeah, it really your experience depends on who you're working with and what the project is. It sounds like, which is it's
Absolutely.
interesting how it works that way. I feel like I don't know if this is just me, but there's not like there's not as many like great film composers in the mainstream of films as there were before. Um, that's how I feel like it's like I feel like music in like it's the biggest movies seem to be kind of generic, and kind of like I don't know, they just feel more like a product, um, than like a unique composition. I feel that way about like most big movies that you see nowadays. So when it's more the latter, like where it is really good, it stands out. You know,
Mm.
how do you feel?
Well, I guess it really depends on what it's your definition of good music. Of course, I mean the trend has changed during the years, and especially probably in the last decade. Um, so I would say there is a lot of great music out there, also in the blockbusters, or you know. Uh, so I think there is so much talent in the industry right now, actually,
Right.
but
Sure.
it's just probably the way of making music that has changed. So you might find a little bit harder to come by, maybe to a soundtrack which sounds like or is similar to the style of Jerry Goldsmith, or
Yeah.
or John Williams, or
Yeah.
Morricone even. So which is I guess absolutely fine. Music evolves just like any other things, and so I guess it's since film music and yeah, I mean music for media in general, it's an industry in the end. So there are certain rules. There are certain rules to follow somehow, in terms of what audience expects to some sort of movie, right? So there are maybe some movies that needs to have a little bit of a sort of fingerprint, like a sort of stamp, if you wish,
Right.
that needs to be followed. But there is a big chunk of the industry where you can experiment, and if you just you might look, the Oscars nomination, for example, where you find so many talented composers, and
True.
so
True.
with new and fresh music, and experimenting with sound. So
Yeah.
I
No, it's
guess
true.
so I guess there are. It really depends on the definition of what is good music. Well, we're not in these are different times. So it also makes sense probably not to hear always the same sort of music that comes from the classical world, which is absolutely fine.
Mm.
So I guess as long as there is time, space for, and room for experimenting and to innovate while retaining a sort of um, standard, so to speak, or anyway industry needs. Yeah, let's say like that. If you have the room to experiment, and you still, you know, um, are in this big box of the industry, and you fit in it, and you achieve a good result, I guess that's good. I'm very encouraged by nowadays music, to be honest, in all genre
Mm.
really, and so I think there is really really great stuff out there.
Yeah, and no, I do too. I think it seems like on average you don't like remember it that much. Like I said with like the biggest movies, there's still really great music. Like you said, even the nominees this year, like Poor Things is a very unique
Yeah,
score. I don't know if you saw that movie or heard
yeah,
the
yeah.
score
So
is.
the movie,
I've
listen,
never heard
yeah,
a score like that in my entire life,
yeah.
and I've studied music, I've never heard, a score like Poor Things. And so that was really cool in that movie.
Yeah, I guess the definitely the soundtrack comes from from the movie itself. So
Mm.
if the movie is crafted in a certain way and it requires some experimentation, for example, or then the music will probably reflect that. So
Right.
probably the more, if you think like about like if you think about like a blockbuster or anything like that, which is more like within a standard and within certain limits of what it needs to be done. Also, like in terms of storytelling, there's always more or less the same sort of curve.
Right.
So the more you get out from that, probably I'm saying just probably, the more you have to room the more room you have to experiment. That's the thing.
Right. Yeah. So maybe it's the stories, or like what they're looking for. Like I said, with like the biggest movies. So yeah, it's very interesting. But yeah, there are still a lot of great composers, of course, like yourself, and
Okay.
yeah, many others. Like no, you're right about that. It's just interesting because like when you watch like I don't know if you go through like movies throughout the golden age or something like Casablanca and
Yeah,
Citizen Kane and like all of those scores are very very like unique and memorable sort of
definitely.
thing. You know what I mean? Or any Hitchcock film,
Oh
you
yeah.
know. I mean Bernard Herrmann's my favorite composer probably of all time. I think so. I think he's my favorite. Yeah, it's interesting to look at that time. Like you just put on any movie from the 40s, and the
Yeah.
music's very like don don don, and it's very operatic, and it's very much like bombastic and sort of like,
Yeah.
it's another character.
Yeah, no,
I think
definitely.
I think that's something that I feel like has gotten kind of lost with like I said, the average movie. There are still great um, scores, but like the sort of music playing being a character, on its own in a sense, you know, um,
Yeah.
you don't hear that as much. Like the music in Star Wars is a character on its own,
Yeah.
really. It's
Uh,
not just filling the space, sort of
yeah.
thing.
I guess also because those kind of scores were also based on thematic material,
Mm.
which probably now is coming back somehow. But the so there was the based on themes, and whereas nowadays you might very well do a soundtrack where there's almost no theme at all, so
Mm,
it's just a matter of language, I guess. Also because with the technology, I mean, technology has changed many things. So in the past, you would deal mainly with the orchestra. So you had a certain path which was writing for orchestra, and you had so a certain language, right? Within the experimentation that you can do with the orchestra, of course. But
right.
when you when the door of the music technology opens, and you you just your language and might change, and that's what happened during the last probably 40 years.
Right. So true. So true. So yeah, I think yeah, no, there's still great music. Yeah, you're right. It's just different, but I'd like to hear more great scores in movies. Because it's definitely when I notice it, it's definitely I feel like it's more the unique. Like even yeah, Killers of the Flower Moon had a really good score as well. But it was very simple but like very effective. I'd never really heard a score like that either, to be honest. Where it was like yeah, I don't even know how to describe that score. It
Yeah.
has like that really cool like pulsating heartbeat
Yeah.
um thing throughout the movie, and I'm sure you saw that one too.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. I mean, what was your favorite movie of the ones that are nominated?
um yeah, probably Poor Things, probably. You mean this
Yeah,
year?
yeah. Poor
Yeah,
things. Yeah,
I mean,
I think.
I guess I like the experience of going to the movie and go to the cinema and watch that
Me
kind of
too.
movie, so to speak. It's quite different the way it's directed, and costumes, and also it's a
Mm.
whole package that I like the it's always fascinating when you are a little bit struck by something that it's very peculiar and quite different from what probably you have seen, or it's similar maybe to some other things you have seen but not quite the same. So yeah, I would say probably just from that point of view I was very fascinated by that movie, and the score, of course.
Yeah, yeah. No, that movie definitely out of all of them was like the I've never seen whatever this is before, and I
Yeah.
love it kind of thing. Like as soon as it starts and you see those hybrid animals, and
Yeah.
it has that weird like, you hear that harp sort of out of tune harp thing. That's the main core of the score, and then she's
Yeah.
like walking weird. And it's in black and white. And you're like, this is I've never seen this before. This is
Yeah.
something else, And then you're just in for a wild ride. So yeah, that was a good one. I think.
Yeah,
Yeah, the
absolutely.
score for Oppenheimer was good too. So yeah, no, there were good scores last year. I see your there were those three movies alone were like
Yeah,
amazing scores for sure. Like
absolutely.
you know,
Top notch.
yeah, those are like really, really good scores. So what do you feel like what what's the legacy that you want to leave um throughout your career?
Oh well, I'm not sure I can talk about legacy at all. Actually, no.
Yeah.
I guess as I said before, I would like to stay as much as possible faithful to my own voice, so to speak.
Mm.
So I will always be happy. My wish is always to be happy about the music that I do, because I'm I'm sure that I had the chance to express myself, um, you know, at the maximum, capacity possible. So I guess that's what I would like to wish, to myself in general, to make have the chance to always make, a music that kind of represents my voice, and, you know, where again I can have the freedom of, doing my thing, and of course respecting the industry again, and what's needed for the project, which always comes first.
Right. Wow. Yeah. So staying true to yourself,
Yeah.
throughout your careers. That's a good answer. I think. Speaking of that, like, what do you what do you think the importance of being creative is to you? Like, why is it important to be creative? I think we all know people that aren't, or don't practice it in any way.
Yeah.
And so, why is being creative important to you? And why did you choose that path?
Yeah, I think that the rare occasions where, especially maybe many years ago, where I could not be creative in terms of where I could not do that all the days, all days, and it really made me uncomfortable somehow. It's almost
Mm.
a physical thing, like I need to do something, with music every day. So um, eventually composing every day, even if not uh, necessarily to a project or yeah. So it's almost well, it's not almost. It is a need that I have probably, and yeah, it's just the way I am. I feel in my own way, of course. I mean, there are many, as you said, many way of being creative, and even people. I guess even people that don't do that as a job, they
Mhm.
are creative in different way that maybe they don't even are aware of. So I guess creativity is part of the human being in general, and it's
Mm.
just a craft that you would like to eventually hone and yeah, practice, as you said. So even if I don't, I have to sit at the piano or whatever, take some instrument and do something, or
Mm.
record or humming, as I said, at the phone.
Right.
So it's yeah,
Yeah, and yeah, no, that makes sense. I think I've said this before, but I think creativity is like the biggest thing that separates us from other creatures. Like
yeah,
animals. Like like that. I think is the biggest thing. Because there are some animals that are very smart. There's some animals that are very strong.
yeah, true.
But you know, there's no animals that like could like make a movie. You know, or make the 16th Chapel
Yeah,
sort of music. Like it's only something we could do.
true. Yeah,
So I think that's why it's so important to value it in some way in your life. Like you said, if it doesn't have to be a job, but you should do something creative in your life, because I feel like the only way to be fully fulfilled in a sense is if you have that in your life in some way. You know,
yeah, definitely.
you know, that's how I feel. So,
That's a good
last
point.
question is uh, who's your favorite composer? Why of all time?
Oh no, that's a tough one.
Yeah.
I think there've been many favorites during the years, and I guess it really depends on the. So since music has a connection with your human brain, of course, and you respond to music, in certain ways. I guess my favorite composer or my favorite music to listen to really depends on what stage I am at, emotion wise, and
Mm.
uh, what stage of my life in general, not depending on my career, I
Right.
am. So maybe when I was a teenager, I my favorite composer was, I don't know, David Gilmour from Pink Floyd, for example, or it could be that.
Love
Or
that. Yeah.
when I got through different sort of cinema, or like different movies, when I start watching some kind of cinema, so to speak. Maybe my favorite composer was Angelo Badalamenti, to say
Okay.
one. So and of course, because I'm Italian, I've been exposed a lot to Ennio Morricone. So he is one of my favorite,
Mm.
under some certain aspect. But I just love composers that are, you know, they that they have their own voice, as I said, nowadays. So I might love Billie Eilish for, as a songwriter, and I might love John Powell or Ludwig Göransson again. Or so eh,
Mm.
I cannot really say there is my favorite composer. There are
Right.
some
It depends
tracks
on your
of
mood.
uh, yeah, it's not only the mood, it's also of what kind of music I'm ready to respond to, if you know what I mean.
Mm.
So,
Sure.
and of course, being working with music, it's always a different point of view from me. I mean, if you ask my I don't know, my aunt or my wife, what's your favorite composer? They might have a different perception of the music, so they might, you know, respond in different ways. So, so yeah, that's a tough question. I gave you some
No, yes,
names,
sorry.
some very
No,
old
no,
and
you did.
some, new, very contemporary, so very new. So, yeah,
No, those are good answers. I think the first composer I ever got into was Michael Giacchino.
oh,
Um and that was like, yeah, when I was like young, I was like I still love him for sure. When I was like that was when he was like just kind of starting out. Um in terms of like, the bigger scores that
yeah,
we know, sort of thing. And I was like, I remember when the movie Up came out, and I
mm,
was probably in like middle school, and would I listened to the soundtrack on my like Walkman thing at the time. Yeah, it was like the I forgot what it's called. It was like one of the earliest iterations of the iPod or something.
oh
But
yeah, yeah,
yeah, it was. I remember, this was back in the day before Spotify or anything like that. So the only way to listen to it, you'd have to buy it off
yeah,
of like something, and that's it. That's all you would hear, just the score. Um, yeah, that was the first score where I noticed the score,
right,
in the best way possible, and I was like, I want to listen to this and like hear how it works. And it's crazy how that score goes like from like such a pretty sort of childlike, innocent thing
yeah,
to like and then the most famous Married Life um track, and then right after that it's like this really like dark sort of string heavy um ominous thing.
yeah,
I forgot what that one's called, but I don't know if you've listened to this story. It's crazy how it does that. It's like super
yeah,
light the first two tracks, and then it goes to like, oh, they're going on this adventure, and it's like very intense, and it doesn't pander
right,
in any
yeah,
way. It like it goes fully there, to like everything it needs to go to
yeah.
score wise.
Gives a sense of what the power of music is, right?
Yeah,
What
it's
it can
such a
do.
it's a great movie, and then Ratatouille also.
Right,
That the
yeah.
score for that movie is like
Hmm.
never heard a score like that either. Or it's like you
Yeah.
know, it's
All
like
great stuff.
yeah, using elements of like French music with jazz.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it's mainly those two, and then he like combines them into his own style.
Yeah.
So he's definitely one of my favorites.
Great.
Um, you know, um, he's very unique. The way that he goes to approach it, and he's like a chameleon in the same way that like Ennio Morricone was,
Yeah.
in a sense, where Morricone did The Thing, but he also did The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly.
Yeah.
It's like crazy. Like there's nothing similar to those scores, you know.
Yeah.
But
Absolutely.
yeah, you know,
And I
he's great.
understand you are a musician and director as well.
Yes,
Oh,
yeah.
that's great. That's great.
I've never composed a score for a movie, but yeah, I have a band, and I write music, and yeah, I
Oh, great.
direct, yes, as
So
well.
it might be a great director to work with because you know music.
Yeah, yes, exactly. But yeah, thank you for doing this.
Yeah.
I appreciate it. This was fun.
My
Is there
pleasure.
anything you want to like plug for the audience when they see this sort of thing, of where they can find you or anything like that?
Oh yeah, you mean like websites and Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh
that kind
yeah,
of thing.
yeah, sure. Yeah, my website is online. It's always updated, and it's just www.adrianoaponte.com.
Mm.
And yeah, also a channel on Instagram where I usually, post my latest things, and I post pictures of instruments that I, I
Mm.
have fun with. So, so yeah, but I guess yeah, as many of us, yeah, all the social media and they're good for exposure and to
Yeah.
get your voice out there and
Mm.
maybe be heard.
Yeah. Okay. So you're on Instagram. What's your Instagram handle?
Oh, that's a good question. I didn't notice that. I'll tell you right away. It's embarrassing. It's
No worries.
Adriano.aponte.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah,
There you
that's
go.
it.
All right. Well, yeah, you can see it for the people who are gonna watch the video. Boom. All
Yeah.
right. Well, thank you for doing this, and yeah, I wish you the best in your creative endeavors.
Thank you very much for this, and thank you for your time.